He was just 4 years old, but he saw it all. A farmhouse soaked in silence and blood. The only witness, a little boy in pajamas, walking alone, carrying a secret that would crack a murder case wide open. It was a quiet Friday morning in Bradford, Ohio. 4-year-old Dameon Huffman had just woken up. The sun was rising gently over the fields, casting golden light through the thin curtains of his grandparents' farmhouse. To Dameon, this place felt like a storybook. His grandparents, Richard and Judy, were his whole world. They weren't just the people who tucked him in at night. They were his best friends, his protectors. He called the farm the dollhouse, not because it looked like a toy, but because it felt so full of love. Warm breakfasts, hugs that lasted a little too long, laughter that echoed through the walls. It was a place where nothing bad ever happened. That morning, like so many others, Dameon climbed out of bed in his pajamas. His little feet padded across the floor as he made his way to the kitchen. The smell of toast usually danced in the air, but today it was quiet. No voices, no footsteps, just silence. Still half asleep, Dameon rubbed his eyes and looked around. He figured Grandma and Grandpa must already be outside feeding the animals. That happened sometimes. So he waited and waited, but they didn't come back. He stood by the window for a while, staring out toward the fields. Still no sign of them, just a tractor in the distance. A bird gliding over the barn roof. The usual morning noise of the farm, but without the people who made it feel alive. Dameon didn't panic. Not yet. He was just a little boy waiting for his morning hug. But something about that silence, something deep in his tiny heart, told him that something was wrong. Safety tips. Even in safe places like farms, always keep doors locked at night and in the early morning. Rural areas feel peaceful, but danger doesn't always knock. Teach children a simple plan if they wake up and adults aren't around. It could be, stay in your room, call out once, or go to a trusted neighbor or adult. Dameon dressed himself in his favorite blue pajamas and quietly tiptoed down the hallway. The house was still. No sound of bacon sizzling. No familiar voices. Only the golden hush of morning light filtering through the curtains. He wandered into the living room. Something didn't feel right. A chair was knocked over. A cushion sat on the floor. A coffee mug lay shattered near the rug. Dameon stared at the pieces, unsure if it had been a dream, or if something had broken while he was sleeping. Then he stepped into the kitchen and froze. There on the floor was something dark, thick, sticky, not juice, not water. Dameon didn't know the word for it, but his little heart understood. Blood. His feet wouldn't move. His hands felt cold. Quietly, slowly, he walked to the bedroom door and pushed it open just enough to peek inside. What he saw made him stop breathing. His grandparents, Richard and Judy, lay side by side in bed. Their blankets were soaked. Their faces were pale, and they didn't move. He wanted to call out. He wanted them to wake up, but something inside him whispered, "Don't. Be quiet. Pretend to sleep." So he tiptoed back to his bedroom, crawled under his blanket, and lay completely still. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He listened. Listened to the floor creak, to the silence, to whatever came next. And when the house was still again, when the danger felt far enough away, Dameon got up, walked barefoot through the back door, and out into the open. Down the gravel road he went, his pajama pants dragging through the dust. His face was blank, his hands trembling. He never looked back. He walked all the way to his church daycare, and when he arrived at 9:15 a.m., covered in blood, he looked up at his teacher and simply said, "My grandparents are in bed." Safety and security tips. Teach children a simple rule: if something feels wrong, stay quiet. Find safety. Tell a grown-up. Even without knowing every detail, Dameon's calm reaction helped save his life. Help kids identify a trusted place they can run to in an emergency, like a neighbor, daycare, or school staff. Children need to know where safe is, even when adults aren't around. The road to the daycare wasn't far, but for a 4-year-old boy in blood-stained pajamas, walking alone down a rural path, it might as well have been 1,000 miles. Dameon didn't cry. He didn't scream for help. He just walked, small, steady steps, past the fields, past the trees, down the familiar gravel road. The one his grandparents used to drive on to drop him off every morning. This time, he walked it alone. The sun had climbed higher by now, casting long shadows behind him. A light breeze pushed at his pajama top, and the gravel crunched beneath his feet. But Dameon kept going, quiet, brave, and focused. When he reached the doors of the church daycare, the workers were already inside getting ready for the day. One teacher looked up and froze. There he was, a little boy, covered in blood, barefoot, shaking. She rushed to him, arms wide, asking, "Dameon, what happened?" He looked up at her with wide, tired eyes. "My grandparents, they're in bed, but they won't wake up." She didn't ask more questions. She didn't wait. She scooped him into her arms, called 911, and gave officers every detail she could. And that's when the world shifted. Police were on their way. Sirens would soon break the silence. But none of it would have happened. None of it, if a little boy hadn't made that walk by himself. Safety tips. Practice walking safe routes with children, so they know how to reach help on foot if needed. Dameon knew where to go because it was familiar. Train caregivers and teachers to act fast and believe children. Dameon's teacher didn't second guess. She called 911 immediately, and may have saved other lives by doing so. If this story moved you, take one moment to talk to your child, sibling, or student about how to get help in an emergency. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest warnings, like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be seen. The officers arrived quickly. It was a strange call. A 4-year-old boy covered in blood saying his grandparents were still in bed and not waking up. At first, some thought maybe it was an accident. A medical emergency. Something explainable. But when deputies reached the farmhouse on South Miami Street in Bradford, Ohio, they stepped into something far worse. The front door was unlocked. The screen door hung slightly off its hinge, as if someone had shoved it hard in a rush to get in or out. Inside, the house was quiet, but not peaceful. Furniture had been pushed around. A coffee mug shattered in the corner, and a dark red trail smeared faintly across the kitchen floor, leading down the hallway. The officers followed the trail. When they entered the bedroom, they stopped cold. Richard and Judy Russell, Dameon's grandparents, lay in their bed, side by side, still beneath the blankets. But they weren't asleep. They had been shot multiple times at close range in their own bed. There were no signs they had ever gotten up to fight or flee. It was as if someone had crept in while they slept and pulled the trigger. The horror was made worse by a terrifying realization. Dameon had been in the house the entire time. He'd woken up, walked through this very room, seen it all, and survived. The investigators paused in that bedroom, taking it in. There was no sign of forced entry, but there was something odd, like tire tracks in the dirt outside, leading toward the nearby railroad. They followed them, documented everything, and slowly, a picture began to form. But the most important clue wouldn't come from fingerprints or footprints. It would come from the only person who had seen it all. Dameon. Safety and security tips. Always lock all doors and windows at night, even in rural or familiar areas. A majority of home invasions in quiet neighborhoods happen because of easy access. Install motion lights and maintain outside visibility. A simple outdoor light or surveillance camera could deter intruders or capture critical evidence, like tire tracks. The moment Dameon's teacher called 911, the wheels began to turn. Police from the Miami County Sheriff's Department arrived quickly, followed by detectives and investigators. They had one urgent goal: to make sense of the horror inside that farmhouse. The officers entered carefully, preserving the scene. Blood patterns, disrupted furniture, no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, but 2 people dead in their bed, and 1 child left behind. The first responders couldn't believe it. They kept asking each other, where's the break-in? Where's the struggle? Why didn't the neighbors hear anything? It felt like the killer had come and gone in complete silence. Then came the next shock. Dameon had walked through it all. He had seen the aftermath, navigated the blood-streaked hallway, tiptoed past death, and somehow made it all the way to his daycare. Now, this brave little boy would become their only witness. A specially trained child interviewer sat with Dameon, not in an interrogation room, but somewhere quiet, gentle, somewhere that didn't feel scary. They asked him soft, simple questions. What happened at home? Did you see anything? Did you hear any sounds? And slowly, Dameon began to speak. He told them he woke up and thought his grandparents were asleep, but something felt strange. He noticed red on the floor. He walked past it. Then he saw them. They didn't move, he said. I called them. They didn't talk. Then he shared something that made the entire room go silent. He remembered hearing footsteps. He remembered hiding. And he remembered pretending to be asleep because he was scared someone was still there. That detail changed everything. It meant the killer was still in the house after the murders. And Dameon, just 4 years old, had outsmarted them by playing still, silent, invisible. One detective later said, "That kid is the reason we even have a case. He knew how to survive before we got there." With Dameon's memory as their guide, investigators began looking for patterns. Who knew the family, who had access to the house, and why someone would come here so quietly and kill without a trace. The trail had begun. Safety and security tips. Teach children not just how to call for help, but how to stay safe in the moment. Staying still, hiding, or remaining quiet, like Dameon did, can save a child's life when danger is near. If possible, work with child advocacy centers when children are witnesses. They offer safe spaces and trained professionals who know how to gently gather key information without re-traumatizing young minds. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Dameon didn't just survive, he remembered. He helped. The 4 years old spoke up when it mattered most. If this story moved you, take a moment to think about the children in your life. Would they know what to do in an emergency? Would they know how to stay safe and who to trust? Like this video if you believe in teaching kids the power of awareness. Share it with someone who needs to hear Dameon's story. And subscribe for more real stories that deserve to be remembered. Dameon didn't know he was the only witness. He didn't know the weight of what he carried, that his tiny voice was the only thread tying this case to the truth. But what he did know was fear and silence and how to survive. The officers watched him closely as he spoke. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't even crying. He was calm, soft-spoken, like a child telling a story after waking from a strange dream. He explained what he remembered. "I got up, I walked out, I saw them in bed." He said the house was quiet, but not in a good way. The kind of quiet that makes your stomach hurt. He told them he heard a noise, someone moving, maybe in the hallway, maybe in the room. "I hid. I went back to bed. I didn't say anything." He said the man didn't see him. The detectives leaned in. "How do you know?" Dameon looked down and whispered, "Because I was pretend sleeping." That sentence, those 3 words, changed the direction of the case. I was pretend sleeping. It meant the killer had come in while Dameon was awake. It meant he was there, alive, while his grandparents were murdered. It meant the child had made himself invisible, and it worked. He heard things he couldn't explain. A voice, a bite, something metal being dragged. When they showed him drawings and photos later, he pointed to a green bicycle and said, "That one. I saw that near the house." That detail, a green BMX-style bike, would become one of the biggest leads in the case. Police checked with neighbors. A few recalled a green bike being ridden near the property weeks earlier. No one thought much of it at the time. But Dameon remembered, and his memory became the foundation for a manhunt. The bravery he showed in those interviews was unlike anything investigators had seen. They described him as calm, focused, unshaken. One officer reportedly said, "He didn't break down. He didn't look away. He just told the truth." And it was that truth, the steady voice of a 4-year-old, that would unlock a door no one else could open. Safety and security tips. If a child reports seeing or hearing something strange, believe them. Even the smallest details, like a color or a sound, could be the key to solving a crime. Help children practice identifying things around them: vehicles, clothes, voices. In an emergency, their ability to describe what they saw could save lives. Dameon had done something extraordinary. He gave investigators more than just memories. He gave them direction. A color, a sound, a clue. The green bicycle. It seemed like a small detail. A child's detail. But detectives knew, kids don't make up the same story twice unless it's true. Dameon had seen a green bike near the house the morning of the murder, and remembered it. So police canvassed the neighborhood, asked about any teens or young men who rode bikes around the area. That's when the name Sean Sargent came up. Sean was 18 years old. He had been spotted riding a green BMX-style bicycle up and down the rural roads near South Miami Street. Some neighbors remembered him hanging out near the train tracks or behind the silos. He didn't live far, and he didn't have a car. He also had a troubled history. Reports suggested Sean had previous run-ins with police, minor theft, suspicion of break-ins, rumors of drug use, but nothing violent. Not until now. Detectives went to his house. His green bike was parked outside. They interviewed him. At first, he claimed he hadn't been near the Russell farmhouse. He barely knew the family, he said, but his story kept shifting. Then the evidence started stacking up. First, there were tire tracks found near the Russell home, tracks that matched the tread on Sean's bike. Then, a weapon was found hidden near the train tracks, buried under a pile of brush. The same type of handgun believed to have been used in the murders. Tests would later connect it to the scene. But what truly sealed the case was a chilling discovery: Sean's fingerprints inside the Russell home, on a doorknob, on a glass. Prints no one had any reason to expect unless he had been there. When questioned again, Sean's story fell apart. The pressure cracked him open. Eventually, he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder. But even then, detectives couldn't understand the motive. Why? Why target an elderly couple who had done no harm? Why strike without warning? Why leave their grandson alive? There were theories: robbery gone wrong, drug-fueled paranoia. But in the end, the truth was darker than logic. Sean had no clear reason, no grudge, no desperation, just the opportunity. And he took it. If not for Dameon, his memory, his courage, and his voice, Sean Sargent may have walked free. Safety and security tips: keep a record of suspicious activity in your area, like unfamiliar people, loitering, or slow-moving vehicles. A photo, a note, or a description might help solve a future crime. Install security systems, even basic ones, in rural or safe communities. Cameras and motion lights can serve as both a deterrent and a witness when no one else is around. The trial didn't last long. The evidence was clear: fingerprints, tire tracks, a recovered weapon, and a witness whose testimony stunned the courtroom. Dameon Huffman sat quietly in a small room with professionals trained to speak to children. His words were recorded: gentle, honest, brave. He didn't speak with rage or fear. He spoke like a child who had seen something terrible and wanted the world to understand. His statement helped prosecutors build a case so solid, even the defense struggled to deny it. Sean Sargent, then just 18, was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. The only sound was Dameon's family quietly holding each other, finally breathing again. The judge called it one of the most senseless, haunting crimes the community had ever faced, and one of the most extraordinary survivals. Sargent was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but no sentence could bring back Richard and Judy Russell. No justice could undo what Dameon had lived through. In the years that followed, Dameon was raised by extended family, surrounded by love, healing, and careful protection from the public eye. They moved away from Bradford, away from the house, away from the silence that had once tried to swallow them. But Dameon never truly left that house behind. As he grew older, his memory remained sharp. Investigators have said that even years later, he could still recall details of that morning that stunned even the most experienced detectives. The trauma was real, but so was his strength. In many ways, Dameon became something rare in true crime stories: a living survivor, a voice of truth, and a symbol of quiet heroism. He didn't fight back with fists. He didn't run. He endured. And because he did, justice was possible. Safety tips: after a traumatic event, children need long-term emotional support. Therapy, counseling, and safe environments help prevent lasting psychological harm. Teach children that their voices matter. Whether they're scared, confused, or unsure, if something feels wrong, speaking up could save a life.